This is not a post about that ship. It's about something related to it. Okay, I have never started a post like this before, but for the record, don't panic. This post is going to very calmly, very matter-of-factly, explain an actual global crisis that's hitting us right now. It's not a crisis caused by that bloody boat, but that boat is part of it. Everything I say will have evidence. When you see it all, you may find yourself worried about just how bad it can get. Please don't. Don't panic. This crisis will pass. Provided nothing else happens, a year from now it should be forgotten. Most viral edit, thank you user sub for the support. You rule. Glad so many found this useful. Unusually for me, in an attempt to combat clickbait, I'm going to do the TLDR now. TLDR, the global supply chain started running into trouble last October, it got seriously worse in January and now. With that ship, we have a teeny bit of a crisis. It will be solved, sure, but it will have a direct impact on you in the next few months. And the price of electronics. And coffee. And food. And a lot more things. Please be aware there are a lot of links in this story. Because I'm bringing a lot of evidence to back this up. Now, in order to show why we are having this crisis, I just need to describe two concepts to you. Not because you are dumb. It's just to make sure we are all on the same page, okay? So to begin. Part 1. How everything works 101. Imagine a giant spider's web. An intricate thing of many threads. These threads are the things upon which our civilization is built. Some of these threads are stuff like the electricity supply or internet coverage. If these things stop working, then things built upon them, like running an online business, cannot happen. Some of these threads are the things that get food items from a farm, into your local stores, say. There are infrastructural logistics. The threads that allow society to function. They go on around us all the time. You ain't dumb, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All those trucks and all those containers and all those deliveries. You know what I mean? Part 2. The global supply chain. Alright, let's look at one important thread in detail. You and me, we are surrounded by a network. This network is the most important network on Earth right now. It brings goods from other nations to our nations. Every iPhone or Samsung phone you have ever held, the screen you are reading these words on, your car, the bus you catch because you don't have a car, the towels in your bathroom, the tops of your kitchen units, heck, the food in your cupboard, and the cupboards themselves. They were either made somewhere else and shipped to you, or they were made in your country and the parts shipped in to make them, and if they were 100% sourced and made in your country, chances are this fact was pointed out when you bought it, as it's so rare these days. Never before in human history has global trade been so complex and integrated. Every day, thousands of ships crisscross the world bringing thousands of tons of things from A to B. But if you think about it, the network isn't just about the goods. In order to work, in order to move the goods, it needs lots of other things. You need ships to sail the seas, big safe ships, that don't sink or tip over or set on fire or crash into canals, damn it. You need fuel for these ships to travel the world. You need crews to man these ships. You need containers to carry the goods, allowing the goods to be transported safely. You need ports and working docks with good infrastructure, you need truck drivers and trucks, you need skilled dock workers, you need automation, and you need all of these things to be working smoothly in order for the global supply chain to work. All of them. If you mess up one, it has consequences. It causes ripples in the system. Any issues get solved, sure, but they cause ripples. Got all that? Cool? So, enough of the build-up. let's explain what's been happening. Part 3. The start. You could say events really began when the pandemic began to hit and disrupt our lives. And that would be true. But the true start point of the current mess is September/October 2020, 6 months ago. There had been warnings that the pandemic could cause bigger long-term disruptions. As far back as a year ago, you had specialists foreseeing what was to come. In September and October you had some nations begin to open up again, such as China, while others began another wave of lockdowns, and some who didn't have lockdowns, might as well have, as remaining open had caused significant impacts on workers due to infection. It was during this period that everyone started more and more online shopping. Everyone. No, I mean everyone. The global level of e-commerce reached an unprecedented peak. In America, in Europe, in Asia, you started to see the surge begin to hit everyone. Especially electronic goods. Distance learning now became a thing, and around the world the orders of electronic goods had surged for the kids. All the goods had processors. Demand rose, computer processors manufacturing plants as such, saw a demand in raw materials, so as make more of the things. Even Amazon, who have the most advanced online delivery network on the planet, was swamped by the uptick in orders. Their number of late orders skyrocketed. And the rule is, if Amazon can't cope with it, bet your ass no one else can cope with it. So you have these massive orders coming in before Christmas 2020. This is causing ripples in the global supply network. Not everyone was impacted by the September to December parcel surge, some did cope. But it was a huge thing. Meanwhile, at the same time, you had less dock workers available to offload goods, due to the pandemic, so as the numbers of goods ordered began to uptick, so you saw more cargoes arrive than docks could cope with. By December you had huge delays in ports like Rotterdam and Hamburg in Europe and Los Angeles and San Francisco in America. Ships were having to wait outside to offload their goods. More ripples. Meanwhile, at the same time, with more orders coming in, many retailers began making orders to try and increase their inventories, and it wasn't just ships. It was the trucks and truck drivers needed to pick up the goods from the docks that were seeing an impact from the pandemic. More ripples. By December you began seeing logjams as European ports were being swamped and there was a shortage of PS5s and everyone was saying it was the pandemic. And it kinda was the pandemic's fault. You see, back in December everyone in the logistics business start pleading that their workers be considered essential workers and get to the front of the queue when it came to vaccines, as they were really needed. But while the pandemic was the origin of the issue and folks could say, oh, it's caused by coronavirus, what was being missed was once you start causing ripples in the global supply network, these problems will cause new problems down the line, which in turn cause new problems. The pandemic may have started it, but now the problems were being caused and perpetuated by the intricate system of global trade we had in place. Best example of this. We discovered we had a problem with these things. Shipping containers. The most widespread of things on Earth. They carry goods all over the world. And in October 2020 we discovered something. We had a shortage. What? How can we have a shortage? Well, we need to back up a year. When the pandemic hit, businesses closed. Globally. Which meant a lot of containers carrying goods got as far as the ports and then stopped in the ports. Then as business dropped off, the number of ships at sea dropped off, so there were less ships and not enough to pick up all those containers. Including the empty ones. So we are now in December, when we started to get logjams in European ports. As I said, Asia began to recover and China especially. So China started exporting to places where workers' numbers were still reduced, as vaccines had not been rolled out to workers in the infrastructure industries. which meant that shipping containers left Asia for Europe and North America, but they were not coming back fast enough. Those regions were facing huge workforce disruptions due to restrictions to stop the workers getting the virus and dying, and these disruptions impacted not only the ports, but the countless cargo depots all across the countries behind them. And since it impacted them, it impacted the inland transport lines. And this wasn't just America. This was Canada, and Australia and Europe. So, without adequate staffing, the shipping containers started to pile up. Not just at ports. And then everyone thought it was a good idea, either because of Corona or because of politics, to tighten the borders and tariffs, and around the world customs became more complicated. Which in turn made the congestion worse and keeping containers out of the supply chain. Even as things improved, you had a situation where if 100 containers arrived in the USA, 60 joined the log jam and only 40 are shipped back to Asia, reducing numbers even more. And how big are those numbers? China to America alone sees 900,000 containers per month. Per month. And only 40% were going back. And that's just the USA. We are not talking Europe. And it takes about 8,000 trucks to totally remove the cargo from one ship. With a shortage like this, the costs of gaining a container on a ship have more than doubled. The costs were so high, the profits so big, that if a ship sailed to LA from Shanghai, waiting to pick up goods from the US to take back, which was delayed due to there being so much of a backlog, was losing them money. It was cheaper to sail back with empty spare containers. Can't we build more? We are. The companies who do build containers, mostly Chinese, have seen people throw stupid money to buy new containers, and the price has almost doubled. Don't take my word for it. As well as that, large numbers of containers were sent off to places like Africa and South America to deliver face masks and materials to help with the pandemic. But no one paid to ship the empty containers back. So they are stuck in places with no business to ship back on. So goods were being moved to be placed on containers to ship overseas. And there wasn't enough containers to put them in. Ripples causing more ripples. And I haven't even started talking about Corona's impact upon crews of merchant ships. There were less ships to move stuff around. So the backlogs increased. In a nutshell, the very complicated and very robust global supply chain has been impacted by a series of events which by themselves are not a big thing. They're not. But they impact upon each other, cause one to amplify another, the ripples feed into one another, and by the end of January 2021 it was becoming a big issue. It was around then you had reports of 40 ships waiting to get into the port of San Francisco to add cargoes to an already jammed system. So we had a shortage of containers. A backlog of ships getting into ports. Globally we began to get a shortage of trucks and truck drivers. Getting goods to and from the ports began to get more backlogged. In some cases things began to spoil. Whole consignments of wine were lost as they sat on the docks and froze. And understand what is happening when we say goods are being delayed. We don't just mean finished goods like iPhones or motorbikes. We mean parts and components that were shipped to factories who make the things to then ship off. Things like glass bottles. Let's go back to wine. Wine goes into glass bottles. If you can't ship a lot of empty glass bottles to the vineyards, they can't stick their wine into it. And the corks. Without the parts and components required to assemble the finished product, you can't make the finished product. You can't assemble the phone. The clothing. The motorcycle. You can't make the things you were going to sell. Are we done yet? Not even close, I'm afraid. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have countries who have ignored Corona suffering hugely, Brazil, with massive workforce disruption, and then we had the Texas storm. We have to mention the Texas storm. See, as much as everyone says China is a vital part of the global supply chain, so is America. A vital part. And then a cold snap kicks in, and because it doesn't have the same fail-safes as the rest of America, Texas closes down. And we all went, well, it's those damn oil companies' fault. But just a reminder. Those damn oil companies also happen to make a lot of plastic. They are some of the world's leading plastic suppliers. And they ain't making plastic. Some of them are still closed. The result? Plastic shortage. More ripples. Big ripples. How big? Normally, when we think about plastics, chances are that the first image that comes to mind is a single-use water bottle or a food container. Yet the truth is that various kinds of plastic are used in every single industry, and there is no way we can wean ourselves off it. Unless we are willing to wean ourselves off cable insulation, that is. This is from this article, which points out that PVC supplies are falling. And this is having a global impact. Some companies package goods using plastics supplied direct from petrochemical teams in Texas. No plastics means delays. Tent makers, medical gown makers, bread bag makers, small companies across America began having shortages. Which drives up prices. Which means folks have to spend more money on goods. Which drives up prices globally and causes plastic shortages globally as business throws silly money to get supplies. Which causes delays in shipping. Which causes ripples.
Voice change. And then, right in the middle of this happens. Stares at the ship for a long time. Takes deep breath. You complete twats. You complete twats. And we make memes about it because it's funny. But we wonder why anyone involved in imports and exports are not laughing at the memes. Why ain't they laughing? It's funny, right? And let's be straight, this bloody ship getting stuck in the Suez is not by itself a huge thing. It's a big thing, but by itself it's not a crisis. A single ripple. But as you can see, the timing utterly, completely, and in every way possible, sucked. Right, so, deep breath. Where are we right now? I mean, all of the above was just the introduction. What happens when the global supply chain gets totally snared up like this? Nike has issued an earnings call this quarter, because of the supply chain problems. Foot Locker says its year-on-year earnings are down because of the same issues. Indeed, all over America, business are facing low inventory levels. What about air freight? Well, FedEx put their prices up, and will keep them elevated, as with passenger plane numbers decreasing, due to the pandemic, and since passenger planes carried 50% of air freight pre-pandemic, they suddenly found themselves the only game in town, and now with the supply chain issues. Pay dirt. FedEx are making a killing. Both Toyota and Honda have had to mothball productions in car manufacturing plants across America and Mexico, due to a combination of the plastics shortage and logjams in Los Angeles port and a microprocessors shortage. The same is happening to Honda in the UK. Speaking of Los Angeles port, this explains how jammed they are now, with 17 ships waiting with 18 more on their way. Also explains that with the stimulus checks going out across America, everyone expects Americans to start buying stuff. A lot of stuff. Driving up demand. And as such a shipping. It's a confluence of events that hit all at one time, from a 100-year pandemic to a manufacturing squeeze, and a consumer buying pattern that had never been anticipated before. The cold weather snap meant US trucking levels in February were down about 5%. Meanwhile, farmers. It is not an overstatement to say that the current situation is devastating to all US agriculture exports. Basically, containers going west to east of America to Asia would be ideal to fill with American foodstuffs. But they have to get the goods those containers fast. Waiting for the goods to get into the containers means the ships are losing monies, and B slows down the time the ships stay at dock, and there are other ships waiting. So, the ship go back with empty containers. This goes into amazing detail about the issues faced by US agriculture caused by this crisis in staggering detail. Anyway, see that blocked ship. At least 12 American grain shipments were being delayed by it. It was costing around $9 billion a day. And we still have to see if the tens of thousands of sheep being transported from Romania to Saudi Arabia are going to make it. We do know that now the ship is cleared, all these ships will be rushing to make their deliveries. Meanwhile in Europe, we also had logjams at European ports anyway. Antwerp and Rotterdam mirrored the situation on the US West Coast. Similar increases to vessel delays could be seen on Asia to Europe routes, with Shanghai to Antwerp average delays rising from 2 to 9.2 days, year on year, February 2020 to February this year. At nearby Rotterdam, there was an average increase from 2.1 days to 5.2 days. The price of coffee in Europe is about to probably go up, maybe as Europe's coffee all comes via Suez. Hopefully stocks are not too short, but even if the Suez is now open, the long-term ripples on Europeans' coffee supplies, this delay on top of increased shipping delays, may cause the price to rise anyway. Oh, and Americans, you kinda get to avoid this as you can get your coffee mostly from Brazil. Only Brazil just had a really bad coffee season, and before the ship decided to ram into the Suez, you had warnings the price of coffee was about to go up in America due to the supply chain issues. We have New Zealand struggling to cope, with ships moving empty containers to the South Island directly in order to help with the export of dairy products, and lamb perishable goods who can't wait around, and need to get into containers fast. Why direct there? Auckland Port went to automate its loading-offloading systems, but the rollout didn't work as well, ended up being short-handed, had to hire foreign dock workers to cope, and turnaround times have increased. New Zealand's crisis is being impacted by delays in Australian ports, by the way. India's ports have a shortage in shipping containers. Apparently behind the reason for a huge drop-off in business in India's ports are more on India below. Samsung is experiencing shortages in materials getting to factories in the US, Taiwan and Korea, which means they can't make the processors that in turn make other items. The 2021 Galaxy Note lineup is in trouble, but they're expecting impacts on computers and TVs before year-end. Dig deeper and you find that the guys who make the stuff for Samsung or Qualcomm are facing supply issues that are driving the price up. And the issue that has caused the shortage of PS5s is going to get worse due to the semiconductor shortage. And it is this chip shortage that forced Honda and Toyota to mothball their plants above. The guys who make the chips can't make them fast enough, because the stuff they need to make them can't get to them quick enough. And the whole issue has made everyone very aware that a small handful of companies in South Korea and Taiwan hold the monopoly on the microprocessors. Some say it's good because it means that China can't dominate that market, but we have all our eggs in one basket right now. Which from a political and economic point of view is dumb. What else is going on right now? We have a global wine shortage as the amount of wine produced drops. Not even mentioning how wildfires hit the Californian wine industry here, and then at the difficulties of the global shipping. Hey! Is it just me or have global food prices been rising for 7 months in a row, corresponding to the global supply chain crisis? Oh look, the UN has spotted it also. And some have pointed out that the disrupted supply chains, which causes food prices rises, also seems to lead to global riots. The world's biggest supplier of wood pulp, which is exported around the world to make toilet paper, are saying they cannot source enough containers to ship their wood pulp to meet demand. Which means a shortage in wood pulp. And by extension, toilet paper. And the UK is facing a serious issue, as on top of Brexit, it's also seeing costs rise due to the shortage of shipping containers, which is probably about to see prices rise across the board. There is a global glass shortage, which will impact the price of solar panels. and mason jars. And now I'm cutting stuff out due to space. There are shortages being reported in cheeses, in seafood, in olive oil, in furniture, in sporting goods and garden equipment. Costco is having problems. Urban Outfitters is having problems. Dollar Tree is having problems. Crocs is having problems. Actually, that last one isn't actually a bad thing. As well as the above, we are seeing shortages and impacts being claimed by the makers of clothing, to home siding to medical needle containers. In India, the makers of electronics parts near the port of Kolkata have found there are no containers there, so are now driving their stuff more than 1,000 miles west to the port of Mumbai, where the supply is better. The increased costs in transporting American grain and soybeans across the Pacific threatens to increase food prices in Asia. Rail companies could help, but there are complications. Everywhere on Earth right now we are seeing stories about companies having issues shipping goods elsewhere. Customers getting frustrated. Products being unable to be made. Dudes, my dudes. This is clearly not a small problem. The system is suffering. And that's not the scary thing. For me, the scary thing. The only folks who seem to be talking about it. Reading all those links. The only folks talking about this at all. CEOs and executives and people in the global supply chain network. When we report shortages, we report local ones. We make vague hand-wave gestures and say global issues, but we don't get what global issues mean. The sheer size and scale of it. I only picked up on this when a fellow Imgurian in South Africa, who's involved in the import and export of wine, starts sending me messages like this. Which makes me go, wait, just how big is this? I'm not a professional journalist. I'm just this crap dude on Imgur who is gazing at stuff and going, is it just me? Or does this seem like a bit of an issue? But allow me to point out there is a reason why it's mostly being sorted by business. It's a business problem, so letting business sort it out, that makes sense. Only business can't sort it all out. A business can solve their problems, but it's beyond them to deal with the global issues. Demanding business solves a global issue is both unreasonable and unfair. Sure, like anyone, I can laugh when big business gets into trouble, and I will laugh as rich XX suffering is always fun, but we all know the reality of this situation. Day follows night. Whenever you see business XX worried about increased costs, you'll know you gonna pay for it in the stores in a few months' time. Don't need me to tell you that. And 2, they can only solve their business's issues. Look at the size and scale of this. Look it. This is a global infrastructural issue. Period. It's already making food prices rise in Asia. Does any American reading this think for 1 minute, given how much you pay for food right now, this will not impact on your food prices? Come on, you know your nation way better than me. I can't tell you anything more than you already know. And it's not just the big core who are losing money here. It's the small businesses. The backbone of any economy. The good folks who try and make things work in small towns and on the outskirts of cities all over the world. They will suffer way harder than any megacorp. Maybe we need someone to lead. To organize a meeting, maybe. The G8. G20. The UN. Someone. Just to admit the scale of this problem, and maybe just come up with a grown-up plan for a grown-up problem. But that would mean everyone coming together practically and pragmatically. And people don't like doing that. Pragmatists are out of favor these days. How could you suggest we sit down and talk to China? Points at the supply chain problems. Dr. Look away from clickbait sensationalism, let's get very calm, and just say what seems to be going on. As I said at the beginning, don't panic. We have a problem in the global supply chain that has already caused issues for many businesses, and looks like this will probably result in the costs of things going up. It's not the end of the world. If we ignore the problem will solve itself over the next year. It will. All those business will eventually work it out. Some companies like shipping companies will make a killing, some companies smaller ones will struggle. We got maybe a year's worth of increased delivery times. We will be fine. Of course, this is assuming something else doesn't happen. That the pandemic third wave isn't worse than the second. That no one starts shooting at other folks with big navy ships at sea. That there isn't a huge-ass fire in one of the big computer chip factories in Japan which could take months to fix, and would cause an even bigger ripple. Oh wait. That last one did just happen. Just. Frickin' great. My genuine thanks to @WineIsFine13, an awesome Imgurian, who is right in the middle of this crap with the global wine industry, and prodded me to start looking into this. Thanks dude for awesome funny chats, scary quotes, and I hope you can use this to turn to your annoyed clients when they say, "What the living shite are you talking about? There are no containers available."